I wanted to let you know in the summer, on July 9th, we're going to have our next event for professional advisors. We're going to do it a little differently. We're going to do a summer kind of roundtable discussions in here, and then kind of an after, I don't know, after hangout, I guess, networking time on patio out that way with drinks and snacks and that sort of thing. So 3 to 5.
Yeah.
3 to 5 p.m. on the 9th of July. That'll be when that is. So mark your calendars for that. And then I wanted to tell you just a quick story of a family that we are working with and have been working with for about a dozen years now. Family here locally set up a donor advised fund with us, and we started working with them in 2012. They had decided to put their son as the successor advisor to their donor advised fund for someday down the line. Well, this couple, both of them have now passed away within just a few years of each other, and so they were, but they had spent a lot of years sort of instilling the value of philanthropy in their son, and so I got to reach out to him here just recently and offer my condolences and say, hey. Love to start working with you, primarily on your grant making through your folks' donor advised fund. Him and his wife are thrilled to get to do that. They both emailed me separately saying how excited they are to come into our office later this week, actually, to get to do that. We had worked with his folks a while back. They were passionate specifically about a project in Island Park in Cedar Falls that happened about 10 years ago. I don't actually know what this project is. I wasn't here, but they had reached out to the foundation and said, hey, what is this project? Can you do some research? Not sure if we want to be anonymous with our giving there or not, but just love if we could get some, some information on that. So we were able to kind of reach out and partner with them in that way. I think they ended up not wanting to be anonymous, but it's just a real good story of how we work with whole families around their giving and setting up a donor advised fund. They also have an estate gift that's coming here, a bequest to their fund sometime in the near future. And eventually that fund will go to benefit for local organizations in the community after the son is done advising the fund. All of that kind of happens pretty regularly with the kinds of donor advised funds that we set up. And that's just a little snippet of the work that we do alongside those folks who are wanting to give in the community. And as a good example of our, I would say, strategic advantage of being so connected to all of the charitable organizations in the community and getting to work with them directly, and also the donors and folks who are generous in the community. So we get to kind of do both of those pieces, and it's just a real, I think it'll be a sweet moment on Thursday when I get to meet with that couple to talk about their folks and his folks and the grant making that has happened and what they want to do moving forward. So pretty neat. One thing to note, there's an Endow Iowa tax credit that that is for permanent endowment funds that we've had for a long time. That is maybe going to go away here soon. That's something that's being talked about in Des Moines right now here in the next couple of weeks. Really making a decision on that, and depending on that decision, that credit, which was previously allocated for all of 2025, may go away at the end of June. So if you have some folks that are thinking about giving to a permanently endowed fund at a community foundation like ours that you're working with that leverage that credit for planning purposes, you might want to just take note. We might only have 2.5 more months left of that credit. Kay, do you want to add anything about Endow Iowa?
No, I think that's great. Other than, feel free to reach out to your local legislators and talk about, the value of that credit. We feel like it's been a really good charitable incentive for people, right? And that 25% still means something, even though the tax rate is a little under 4 right now. So we're certainly advocating for it. And I think the more Iowans that are, the potential that they might be able to extend it.
Yeah. One real quick thing inside your folder, there's a little half sheet. If you would just open that very briefly. All the community foundations across the state are engaging in a campaign called 5 for the Future. 5 for the Future is is our way of asking folks who are in that estate planning part of their lives to consider leaving 5% of their estate to charity. Of course, we're happy to administer those dollars for those folks, but they could go directly to charitable causes as well. So if you see that out there, 5 for the future, that's really what this is. It's us talking to folks, and it's really been really well received. As I talk with people that have a donor advised fund with a different kind of fund, to say, hey, what are you thinking about for your legacy? Do you have some estate plans? What do you think about leaving 5% to your community, in a variety of different ways that we can administer? And people are saying, I guess I never really thought about that. And I think Matt will say a little more about I didn't know about this thing that people are saying when they're doing their estate planning. Maybe they didn't think of it. So bringing it up, in my mind, is more than half the battle in terms of being able to grow those assets for our community. So Matt is a wealth advisor with Northwestern Mutual. He's been there 16 years. 16 years. He's been on our investment committee since 2016, so he's been around here for quite a while. And yeah, he lives in Waterloo and has 3 kids. Two kids. So thanks for being here today, Matt. Appreciate it.
Yeah. I appreciate Derek and the staff for inviting me in, and it's been a pleasure serving on the investment committee and now on the board here for only a couple of months. But it's great to learn how all the pieces work from just the investment committee and what they do, and all the way down to now, of course, what the board does. And there's a lot more pieces of that puzzle that I'm getting to explore now. So today we're going to talk about the baby boomer generation and planning for the greatest wealth transfer. So I would ask you guys to be a little bit interactive. I'll have some questions. A lot of this info came from a planning study that Northwestern Mutual does every year since 2009. And they pull participants of adults, 5,000 of those a year, and just ask them a variety of questions. Year over year, I went through several years of the study and data, and not a lot has changed other than what you could think of that are the most recent topics of things that are on people's minds, such as obviously inflation and those types of things that we didn't hear anything about several years ago, right? But I thought a lot of the data was interesting to me here. So over the next 20 years, what's your guess on the amount of wealth that will transfer over the next 20 years of people passing on? Does anybody have a good guess? And Derek, you can't say because you already saw it. Any guesses? It's in the trillions, I'll say that. Much higher than a couple.
25.
So, understanding the scale behind this, the number is 90. $90 trillion is the estimate. Again, I found in between 85 trillion to 90 trillion. Now that number might have went down in the last couple of days. We're not talking about that type of wealth transfer, but again, $90 trillion. So the idea here, and we want to talk about, and some of what Derek alluded to was, where will this money go? So without the planning that we do as professional advisors, we can probably guess where a lot of this money may go. But we don't want to see our clients obviously be sending the money there. We'd rather have them put it to better use, as we would think of it, in terms of whether it be a foundation or passing in a good way to maybe their children or grandchildren. So that's what we'll talk about here today. I'll kind of have to use my cheat notes here, but guys, when we walk through this, the interesting part in these studies, what we found is that nearly one third of millennials expect to receive an inheritance from what we would say the baby boomer generation. Okay. But of those expecting to receive an inheritance, they said 60% of them said it was highly critical for their long-term financial stability or security. So when I read that, I thought that's kind of a scary thing. I would probably be put in a millennial generation, but I don't like to put myself in that box necessarily of thinking of 60% of them think I have to receive something in order for me to be financially stable long-term. So if we think about our parents and the baby boomer generation, that'd probably be a very disappointing statistic for them to hear, right? So with that is can we think about the idea of, if now only 22% of the boomers said that they plan to leave a gift behind. So the shift is much different. I need to receive money, but the generation that's supposed to be passing this on, they don't plan to do that. So where will the money go? Of those 22%, they did say, and this is obviously a good thing, is 43% of them said it would go to a charitable organization of some sort. 70% said to children, grandchildren, and this one spouse, which we know typically in the planning, if one passes away before the other, it typically goes to the spouse, which then obviously would probably go to these two next areas for the next piece of planning. So what do you guys think about when you see that in terms of the type of planning conversations that you guys have with clients? Is that similar to what you're finding when you say, hey, are you charitably inclined, or where do you see maybe your assets passing? Are these primarily the three answers you get? Do you get something outside of that? Do people say, I don't know, I haven't thought about it? What would you guys say a majority of the advisors that are having conversations here?
Charity doesn't seem to rank very high on a lot of the people I talk to. They're kind of looking to take care of their kids, their grandkids, things of that nature. Some of them may do something while they're alive and figure, I've kind of paid it forward a little bit, but I don't see a lot going. See some, but it's not a lot, not a lot of money, but something is better than nothing.
I would echo that too. It's take care of my spouse, and it's the kid and grandkids and other things, charitable organizations and district.
And what would you, if you had to really dig deep with those people, what would you say primarily the reason why they may not have that as the top priority over the other two on those categories?
They feel they need to take care of their families first, and then see what happens.
Yeah, I think we hear a lot is, well, whatever's left, then, we can divide that up. But I don't want to give it all away and have the possibility of running out of money or disinheriting my children, because obviously, as we saw, they expect to receive something from this. So when we think about that is, what is the primary focus of the next generation as parents think about, passing that money on? So in this study, what was interesting that I found, and this is Gen X through millennials. So anybody from 30 to 60, this was their major sources of debt outside of a mortgage. Which again was a little scary to me looking at this and saying, whether you're 60 or 30, the major source of your debt comes from credit cards, car loan, which we can probably somewhat expect is that's a lot of people carry a car loan balance. This one, for the first time in the new 2025 study, trumped student debt, medical bills. And this was very much by the younger generation and not by the older generation. So again, an interesting thought of like, okay, how are the next generations viewing money and how they feel like maybe some of these numbers relate back to the fact that they need money from another generation in order for them to feel like they can have long-term financial stability. Now, again, the baby boomers and the generation before them probably would have went crazy if they found out how much credit card debt is obviously being carried by those people from age 60 to age 30, as most of those people probably maybe never even had a credit card at that point. So the average personal debt outside of mortgage is $21,500. So there wasn't a breakdown of statistic of how much this was, but we can probably figure that a large portion of this balance does come from short-term personal credit card debt that they are, living on. And the reason for that is there was two obstacles that were interesting. Is their major concern and why they feel like they aren't financially stable was from inflation and lack of savings. So again, inflation, well, I can't afford what I need, but I still might buy it anyway. And therefore I'm racking up credit card debt, and we all know how that works because we're all educated in finance. So of all those 5,000 studied, basically only 2,500 of those people said that they would view themselves as disciplined financial planners. We're not saying financial planners in the sense of maybe what I do or some of you do in the room, but like disciplined financial planners in the fact that they budget and they know where their money's going on a monthly basis, and they know what their income and their expenses are, and know how, hey, we should have a decent amount of savings set aside for emergency funds. Those were the things that they, really viewed as being a financial planner as a, general population. So I think the basis behind this is communication being key. So, as you guys think with conversations with clients and Derek had talked about this with that client, and it sounds like maybe those parents had good communication with the son about, hey, here's what we've been doing over the years and why we've been doing it. It is really just saying, okay, how is this wealth going to transfer? Because I bet anybody who's met with a client can relate, or maybe you've had siblings involved in a conversation and your parents have maybe passed on. Is we often hear in our meetings is clients say, it'll be fine. They love each other. Mm-hmm. And they do until there's money involved.
Yep.
I think, Larry, you said that. Good luck, right? But parents always think it's going to be absolutely fine until there's money involved. So how do you have those conversations ahead of time? So how are we working with clients? Well, I'll back up a second. Are you guys actively engaging clients in conversations of what their long-term wealth looks like? To the question earlier answered, I want to take care of my spouse and I want to take care of my kids first. But how much do you want to leave to them versus how much can you leave to them? Do you want to be leaving that money today for them to use and you see them maybe use, or do you want to leave that money when you're no longer here? And I think that can be said in the same sense of, Derek speaking of, they saw what their charitable gifts did while they were living. Their kids get to see what their charitable gifts did after they're no longer here. And probably those people's grandkids will get to see what those charitable gifts are going to do later on, right? So we're now talking about like 3+ generations of instilling charitable giving. Now those people, I'm not sure what their size of wealth was, but they decided, hey, while we're here, this is what we want to do and kind of the message we want to instill. So when we think about people and planning is oftentimes we find that clients get to the point where it's too late, where they wish they would have maybe spent more when they were retired and enjoy their time. They wish they would have given more to maybe their kids or grandkids to see them, be successful, but they also wish they would have given more to charity to see those organizations that are near and dear to them successful. So I just did a little scenario. So this is a lot of what we do with our clients, and I'm sure many of you professional advisors do something very, very similar. But the scenario that I have up here is just kind of showing through, and I would call this probably like a pretty average couple, and I try to relate back to somebody here. And so John and Jane are 65. They had a total assets of about $2 million between IRA money and Roth IRA money. They had a pension, so whether it's IPERS or something of that nature, of $3,000 a month, and then they had roughly $48,000 a year from Social Security. And so it's not real big here, but you can see it at this point in time because this is the IPERS that's coming in. Here's the Social Security pre-tax money, Roth money. If they lived until they're basically age 100, when they passed away in the year 2055, they passed away with about $5.7 million. So again, they lived the lifestyle that they wanted to live. They were living off of $10,000 a month with no debt. They lived the lifestyle that they want to live, but they went to the other side with $5.7 million. Now they might be great, but at the same time, if you said, hey, you could give away more money during your time, you could give more money to your kids or grandkids, how would that impact you? Well, what if I run out of money, right? I mean, that's the question that everybody has. And so what we did here was we just said, hey, in this scenario, they had 2 kids and they said, hey, each parent's going to give their kid $19,000 because that's what they can do in today's tax environment. Obviously, that inflates every single year. So $38,000 a year. And then they were also giving $20,000 a year charitably. And this number did not inflate. It was $20,000 a year. So they're basically taking, about $60,000 out of their estate every single year until they passed away. With that being said, instead of leaving $5 million, 5.7, they passed away with about $833,000. Now, again, that's still a very great number, but the impact they got to see was, hey, we got to see the charities that we enjoy and want to see thrive with. That's a donor advised fund, or it's giving directly to your church, whatever that may be. But we also maybe got to help our kids or grandkids out along the way, and in times where maybe they needed it, or we wanted to see them benefit from that. So what we show here, guys, is the reason we do this is we want clients to understand that they probably don't want to pass away with $5 million. They'd probably rather this scenario where they get to see the impact that they give. And I think that's the importance of us having those conversations with clients early on. So tell me, when you guys think about that, what would be the impact to your clients, emotionally, is the way I would think about it, from showing them, here's your scenario versus here is your scenario, and this is what you can do, how do you think that would make your clients feel as you sat across the table from them and told them, hey, here's the possibilities?
I think it gives them a lot to think about that people don't really think about on their own. You know, they won't have an answer right away. But it's a really good start. I just think people aren't aware of how much things could really grow and what it can achieve, either now or in the future.
Yeah.
I think it has a positive impact on their overall health. If they're participating during their lifetime in their communities with the benevolence of their gift.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I mean, just the joy in the giving, right? But I think that this also is heavy in the financial modeling, which again, I think is so helpful because to your point, so many people think they're going to not be able to, they're going to run out of cash, right? And even when you're talking to somebody who has $5 million in wealth and a long-term care contract, they still think they're going to run out of money, right? It's like, actually, no, you're okay, right? Especially I think when you're talking about the generation that probably didn't have debt at all or didn't have credit cards, right? It's just a whole different mentality, I think. I think this is awesome.
Yeah, I think the idea again always goes back to, you know, the previous scenario of like Kay brought up, well, what if we have a long-term care event, or we have, you know, something that comes up that cost us a pretty good amount of money. And stress testing that to say, well, the good news is behind some of these things is that they're not set in stone things that you have to do. It's not like you would have to give that money to kids every single year, or you wouldn't have to give that money to charity every year. This was just saying you quite frankly could do that if you wanted to. So, you know, knowing that it's a very fluid plan rather than a set in stone plan is helping the clients understand is we can change this. But the reality is you have the capacity to do this if you wanted to do something like this. And if they don't have kids, or they don't maybe want to give that money to kids, well, maybe give more to charity in different years. You know, not as a CPA doing this is, you know, what's the tax implication behind this? So a lot of the people we see inheriting that money today is a lot of the clients that come in. Not that they're not grateful for the money that maybe their parents passed them, but if they're in a pretty good income job already or career, and their parents passed them a good share of pre-tax money, Uncle Sam gets 50% of that money, right? And so if you could say, hey, Mom and Dad, you can go spend this money, or you can give it to us and stay in relatively the same tax bracket. Why not give it to us now rather than passing us a bunch of pre-tax money in retirement that we're going to end up having to spend over, you know, a 10-year time frame now based off of the laws that are there. And it's probably not as impactful to the kids if the parents live till they're 100 years old. The kids might be in their 80s, right? And it's definitely not as impactful to them as maybe when the parents are in their 60s and 70s helping their kids when they're in their 30s and 40s, right? So it leads to the idea here is, you know, just having discussions, and I think instilling the values of, you know, how can we help kids? How can we help parents understand that they have capacity? So again, gifts to children, grandchildren, at per couple, obviously, to each one. Funding 529 plans. So again, if college is important for their grandparents or the parents, helping fund 529 plans. Direct payments. So we talked about how a big concern is, you know, younger generations having debt. You know, technically, if they're dependents, a parent can help pay direct payments for tuition or housing for them, taking some of maybe that burden off of them, that they don't have to be taking out massive amounts of student loans or other debt that's gonna, not help them long term. Or just working to establish trust for future gifts and wealth transfer in a tax efficient way. So again, the long-term planning there of whatever money is left, how do I weave that in the most efficient way? Now, into the charitable side, which is why, a lot of us are here other than the food that was brought in. So when you guys think about the charitable and you answered this question earlier, is always, it's probably maybe the last piece on my list. But working with clients, how can we help bring it maybe to the forefront of what their planning is? So, we think about sharing the organizations that are very close to them as parents. So to Derek's piece of, I'm sure those parents probably sat down and said, hey, we've partnered with the community foundation. We've established a fund there. Maybe they had done something separate from that in their church or somewhere else. But talking about, what organizations are really important to them when they're doing that planning, but talking with their kids about what organizations are important to them or what issues are important to them. Because the baby boomer generation has much different issues and what's important to them than what, I would say that those people that are going to ultimately inherit that money, the Gen X and the millennials, their issues are different, as we can definitely see in today's society than what is being given away today. So, they may have specific things that they can give it to, but the son and daughter-in-law might say, hey, this is maybe what's important to us, and we're gonna pivot and give it somewhere else, but it's still going to a good cause that the parents are, happy about. And then getting them involved in the giving each year. I think, I've heard multiple stories from, lots of the staff here, but like actively involving the kids in the conversations of, hey, where is the money going and why did mom and dad do this or grandma and grandpa do this? Because I think it really instills the values of obviously being financially smart, but also, giving back to the things that were important. And yes, I might inherit some wealth, but maybe I should share some of that wealth, when I'm alive, of what my parents maybe give me, because of maybe what my parents received from their grandparents, right? So instilling those values through either direct gifts or Derek, mentioned donor advised funds. It'll be very unfortunate if that tax credit goes away. Hopefully we still see people still wanting to establish those things, because we know that people don't just do that for the tax savings, right? They obviously have another purpose. But it'd be very unfortunate to see that happen. I myself, this last year, had some clients that were younger, and I knew they were charitably inclined, and had a conversation with them and said, hey, Derek, I want to set a meeting with you with this couple. And came in, sat down, had a great meeting. Ultimately, they decided on the number that they wanted to give. But the number they gave was based off of them having 3 young children, and each of them kind of had their own amount. And so they look forward to, when those kids get to a certain age, getting them involved with saying, hey, here is kind of your X percentage. I think it's 4, it's the number, right? Here, out of this amount of money, your 4% gets to go towards whatever you choose off of this list. And same with this child and this child. And they're like, that's going to go indefinitely, and instilling value in them, right? Now, again, their kids are young, right? So this is going to be many, many years from now. But that's something that they voiced to me was like, we wouldn't have known about this without. And I think Derek made a point to me earlier this week is like majority of the people that don't give money to charity or to an organization, nobody ever asked or nobody ever told them, right? It's our job as advisors to bring people like the staff here to do that for us. Again, I didn't have to do anything other than place them at the table, and Derek sold them on the idea, right? That's the beauty of really partnering with the community foundation or another organization to help them do that, because it's something that they're going to remember, and they will be advocates for the same thing of other people that they may know that's in a very similar situation. So again, really guys, understanding the unique attributes that really do concern the baby boomer generation. How can we help them? So the first thing I would say is most important is have those conversations earlier. The earlier, the better. So again, these people that I'm referring to are, in their 30s. And they're establishing this at an early age. So have the conversations earlier. Show them the impact that their financial plan is giving them today, if that's the goal. So again, can they afford to give away money today, whether they're older or younger? Showing them the capacity that they have. Collaborating with other advisors, so their financial advisor, their CPA, their attorney, so everybody's on the same page to know, hey, here's what the ultimate goal is, because I feel like sometimes these ideas can't make it all the way to the finish line if we don't have everybody involved in the conversation. So that's very important. And then what I just talked about is get their children involved in their financial planning. So inside that study I referred to earlier is that 76% of parents would feel comfortable including their teenage or young adult children in a meeting with their financial advisor, which I thought was interesting. When I see teenage, I'm like, that's probably a little young, but again, young adults. So I would challenge you guys to think about as you run whatever practice you have, CPA, attorney, financial advisor, trust officer, anything you can think of. Try to ask the parents, like, would you like your kids to be involved in the conversation? Because I think sometimes us advisors just assume that they'll bring whoever they want to be involved, when ultimately they almost need an invite to say, hey, bring your kids here and get them involved in the conversation. Are many of you guys like having those conversations where you see, maybe one or two generations sitting at the same table and having maybe that annual family planning meeting with you as the advisor or another advisor?
Our firm is being very intentional about the communication, and we're putting a lot of our educational resources behind that messaging. I was surprised at the 76% though, because I think clients tend to be more private than not private. And so one of the things we're trying to do with our messaging, if you will, around this is that private data can stay private, but you still need the healthy communications around our mom and dad checking all the boxes to get their ducks in a row and things like that. So it's kind of a modified yes. We're trying to focus on that, but I think a lot of people are more private than letting their teenage child see their.
Yeah. I was shocked when I saw that number as well. I know I myself can do a better job of that. I'm sure we all can. And I'm sure there's a way to, Mike, your point of, what's a good way of having that meeting with maybe still keeping what they want private. And maybe there's, an in-depth definite planning meeting that you have that talks about the balances and the numbers and all the things. And then there's maybe another meeting with the kids involved to say, hey, here's what we're planning and wanting to do, and maybe why mom and dad are, you know, giving you money each year to help you. Now we want that to be used for good purposes, but here's why we're doing that. Or here's why mom and dad are really passionate and they're, you know, giving money to X organization. Because I think what we find out oftentimes is when whoever the executor of, you know, if it's typically one of the kids, finds the financial junk drawer, quite frankly, is they're like, we didn't know that mom and dad had X, Y, or Z. And now they have to go track that down, and they spend months and months and time and energy doing that, where, you know, to Mike's point, you know, if they're working with Mike, it's like, we just know to call up Mike, and we knew that their entire plan was with Mike. We might not have known all the details, but we knew that the entire plan was there. And that's somebody we can trust help us carry out what mom and dad, you know, wanted us to do. And that's it. So, open to any questions or thoughts amongst the group, guys, but I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to be more transparent with clients and help them better understand what their capacity is while they're living with their money, rather than thinking that they have to keep every dime and we see them pass away and it doesn't go to the people or the organizations that they really want it to while they're living. And I think from everything that I went through on all this data, that's what kept on kind of hitting me in the face was, again, more and more transparency, because we don't know when those last people's time here is. And what we don't want to have happen is, again, the kids love each other until they don't, when money's involved and things get messy. So.
Those conversations and meetings are more prevalent when you've got generations involved in the family businesses, because it's only natural and so forth for them to know more about this and that, buying, gifting, or whatever, stock or farms or whatnot, to conceiving generations. So if your client is here, son or daughter in Portland, Oregon, and you got somebody else in Houston and somebody else in Ohio, you know, kind of loses its effectiveness a little bit. They love their kids, don't get me wrong, but it's kind of like they know that nobody's coming back here to take over this or that, so they have to kind of plan accordingly.
Yeah, I think one thing, Derek had mentioned the Giving Five. Some of the stat they had was thinking of money leaving the state, right? Is that of the $90 trillion, and that was over 20 years, but over 40 years, 128 billion will pass in the state of Iowa, and 5 billion of that in Blackhawk County. But more and more of that will leave as people move to different states as their kids, or if, you know, the parents ultimately move out of state. They may have something that's still important to them in the state of Iowa, or organizations that are. So having that conversation and helping them plan to, you know, maybe how can we keep some money here locally that's still important and impactful.
One thing I was going to add, Matt, is, and I'm going to speak for the UNI Foundation, and I'm sure it's the same with the Community Foundation, but having a documented intent for the gifts that are coming to the foundations is really important, I'm sure for you guys as well, because we do get gifts that come in and just are stated for the UNI or UNI Foundation, and they go into our Vision Fund, which is a fund that's used to, you know, for a gamut of reasons, you know, scholarships, etc. we really would love to follow their intent if there's something documented, and we really like to have that documentation.
Yeah, I think a stat I don't think I shared with you, but sorry, I had it here some. Only 60% of boomers that were in that study had a will. 60%. And the majority of them that answered why they didn't have a will, what's the guess of why they didn't?
Didn't know how much to leave people or something like that.
They
That's
have
sometimes
enough,
what I
they
hear.
can't worry about
I don't have enough.
They don't have enough. I don't have enough, right? We all know how that ends up.
Yeah.
But 60%, right? I mean, and again, it's tough, as we always say, like we can tell clients, hey, you need to get a will, and we can beat them over the head every single year when we meet with them. But like, unless they do it, we can't make them do it, right? So again, having collaboration with people inside this room and outside of this room to get them to do those things, because if they don't have the will, the piece gets extremely messy. And again, that's where the family falls apart, and maybe what the parents had always talked about never gets taken care of, whether it's to go to the kids or to charity. They just thought, again, my kids will know that I love my church, or my kids know that I love this organization. Doesn't work like that, right? So having that conversation early. Yeah, where.
Yeah, there's another dynamic for the baby boomers out there that have resources, and but once they've retired and their income is going to be a little bit different. Much of it is not as fully taxable as some of the other past years, and yet they may have accumulated qualified assets, and they have to take required minimum distributions. That's becoming a bigger and bigger amount as those assets grow. And if you know that's an annual planning opportunity for all advisors, and I'm not so sure that that's always been something that is on the top of the plate. And I do think that's almost a responsibility of an advisor to make sure that they're attending to where could you be directing these these dollars to charity, since you have to have 38,000, I think, in order to have them deductible. You might as well give that money through your IRAs or qualified dollars. So, you know, it's a big opportunity for families, and that also is something to get the children involved in. And I always think that getting children involved as early as you can, while it's not exactly profitable for us advisors to work with the kids, we think of that. But when you think of how satisfying it is for the families, the mom and dads, to see their kids, I've had situations where I've had, since I retired, people ask me, hey, I need to have, I'm worried about my 3 kids, and I would like to know, what would you do if you were me and trying to help your kids? And I just said, send them to an advisor that's a qualified advisor that can start with them today, if the advisor is willing to accept them as a client. I think that's an opportunity as an advisor that we really ought to be encouraging too. So there's a lot of things. I love what you said and what you've offered. This is really good stuff.
Yeah, and Matt, I was just saying lots of good information. I was just going to tack on to Larry. I think doing the charitable distributions from the IRAs has been really helpful to just start the conversation about like, oh, you've been given to your church the past few years. Do you want to include something? Do you want to name them the beneficiary or partial beneficiary or something like that? So I think that's a huge help to just get that conversation going, to save them some taxes now. You
Well,
know?
especially since, you know, their children, if they're set to be the beneficiaries, they have to have it out in 10 years.
Exactly.
And that's something that, you know, I've been pushing. I have a couple of clients that have significant IRAs, and I've also reached out to the tax preparer for these clients and said, you know, given where the children are themselves financially, this isn't the best idea of what to do with this money as the children being the beneficiaries. You know, so if you can also support what I'm saying, I think it's in everyone's best interest, you know, if they look at a more charitable solution with regard to the ultimate place for these funds to be.
I think a lot of folks look at those required distributions or charitable giving in a lot of ways as like a one-time transaction. Like, yeah, that money will do good somewhere. I guess maybe I would be open to that. But I was thinking earlier, Julie, when you said you said something about like the health, like folks and their health later on in life, and how we've never had more loneliness conversations. We've never had more like the kids are all moving away. It's never been easier to do that than it is now. And like a lack of purpose, people trying to go back to work because they don't know what to do with themselves. And the idea of establishing some purpose inside of their charitable giving, volunteering, giving their time to organizations that they're also maybe giving to financially. I once upon a time started an organization, a nonprofit in our community, and had a number of folks that I got to work with that were in their 60s and 70s who just like, it was really neat to see them just sort of blossom inside of the kinds of families and kiddos that we were serving. And they were using their time, they were giving of their money. And it was like some of these people really have a real purpose that maybe they didn't think they'd find. And it didn't have to be a one-time transaction. Okay, right? It can be a transformational period of it. So I just think that's it's a really neat one when we get to see that.
Win-win for everyone.
Well, thank you, everyone. Obviously, happy to stick around and answer any questions, or obviously, I think Derek might send this out after the fact, but I think hopefully we can all find a reason to have more candid conversations with clients and help them plan early rather than plan late, so they can impact the people and the organizations that they feel are best to them, rather than when they're not here anymore, and they can see the impact of that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.